Spider-Man is the most popular superhero around, raking in more money at the box office than any other single superhero, including Batman and Iron Man. Speaking of which, Iron Man and Spider-Man are kind of doing a crossover in Spider-Man Homecoming. This movie sees Tony Stark as a mentor to Spider-Man and offers a dynamic that we've not seen before between these two characters in film. So we got to thinking about other crossovers we want to see between Spider-Man and other Marvel heroes. Here are the 10 Spider-Man crossovers we all wish would happen. Let us know what your favorites are, and remember to push that red subscribe button for more.
Since I can't touch the king, I'm gonna take his queen.
Heroes for hire. The Heroes for Hire, Luke Cage and Iron Fist, are best known as a duo. They have their own routine and they do well fighting bad guys in that team, so throwing Spider-Man at them would be pretty funny. Spider-Man's closest allies in the comics are the guys from the Netflix TV shows, so we'd really want to see him team up with the Heroes for Hire. It would be cool to see their different perspectives on fighting bad guys. While the Heroes for Hire accept money, Spider-Man might have a different look on it. After all, action is his reward. This movie is likely to be more of a comedy, with Iron Fist and Spider-Man cracking wise with Luke Cage to act as the straight man. It won't take much writing skill to get them conveniently to meet each other, seeing as all of them operate in New York City, and Spider-Man swings around a lot of Manhattan. As for a bad guy, well, they could fight against anyone the writers want, as all of them have extensive rogues galleries from which to pluck. But we're going to assume this is a Spider-Man movie featuring the Heroes for Hire and say that Hobgoblin would make a great villain to test all of their combined powers. Hell, maybe even throw in the Sinister Six instead. That would be cool.
Let me put you on hold.
Black Widow. While they're both named after spiders, these two characters are pretty different from one another. Black Widow is a smart, serious spy who gets put on high-profile, top-secret missions by S.H.I.E.L.D. Spidey, on the other hand, is a wall-crawling super-genius scientist who fights a man dressed up as a giant rhinoceros. Needless to say, it's the contrast between these two that would make them fun to watch together on screen. While Widow is more efficient at her job, Spidey is the smarter of the two and has tons of potential inventions to lend her to fight more bad guys. What we'd most like to see is the strategies the two would come up with in order to defeat their enemies. Something that the Amazing Spider-Man films had, but the MCU so far has greatly lacked. We don't want to see them just fight bad guys until he's out cold. We want to see them plan, work together, trap the bad guys in their web. And we can't deny that the dialogue between the two of them would be funny, with Spider-Man being his usual wisecracking self and Black Widow being a lot more serious by the book in comparison.
Not vengeance. Punishment.
Punisher. While known as a vigilante anti-hero, the Punisher was originally conceived as a Spider-Man villain. It only makes sense to bring Frank Castle back to his roots and have him cross over with Spider-Man. While some may complain that this stops the Punisher from inflicting gory violence, that sounds like the majority of his appearances in the Spider-Man comics to us. The setup is simple. The Punisher returns to New York City and is trying to take down their mutual villain, the Kingpin. Spider-Man wants the Kingpin to be brought to justice within the law, and the Punisher wants him dead. This dynamic isn't too different from what we've seen in Season 2 of Daredevil. What would be different is a much higher budget, allowing for Punisher to use more elaborate devices and weapons, and it allows for Spidey to do all sorts of stunts and tricks that Daredevil just can't do on the Netflix budget. Spider-Man is already morally opposed to the Punisher, who is willing to kill at the drop of a hat, as opposed to Spidey, who needs to be pushed to do it. These, of course, are two of Marvel's most prized and iconic characters. Blade. Now we're getting into the good stuff. Blade made some of his earliest appearances in the Spider-Man comics, and let's be real here. A crossover between these two just writes itself. I can already see it in big bold print. Spider-Man and Blade fight vampires. That's really all you need. Spider-Man runs into a vampire while swinging around New York one night, nearly gets bitten, but is saved by Blade, who introduces Spidey to the world of the vampire. And together, the two of them team up to destroy a vampire nest in New York City. A crossover between these two also allows the use of villain Michael Morbius. Morbius, the living vampire, is a recurring villain in both Spider-Man and Blade comics, and would provide a perfect antagonist for the movie. He would provide a challenge that the two haven't faced before, as Morbius is not actually a real vampire, but a science experiment gone wrong. Hence the title, The Living Vampire. After having fought so many regular vampires, Morbius throws a spanner in the works and gives them far more trouble than a regular vampire would. So let's make it happen. While some would complain that the lack of blood in a Spider-Man movie would make it less effective, the vampires would probably just burst into flames after being killed in this movie, keeping it rating friendly. Spider-Man and Blade team up to fight vampires. Say it out loud. We need this to happen.
I hope it rains.
Fantastic Four. We realize that this could only happen in a perfect world in which a Fantastic Four movie is bearable. But Spidey has a long history with the superhero family. In fact, the first issue of Spider-Man back in the 60s was about him trying to join the Fantastic Four. Deciding he was better off as a solo hero, Spider-Man eventually did join the Fantastic Four after the death of Johnny Storm. If Fox ever decides that Fantastic Four isn't worth the money they put into it and sold the rights to Sony, it would give Sony a huge window of opportunity for their own smaller cinematic universe. We already know that Sony isn't letting Marvel keep Spider-Man and are just loaning him out. So when they get the full rights back, they could buy the Fantastic Four and make more money off it than Fox. In theory. The movie can start the same way the Spider-Man comic series did, with Peter Parker looking to make the Fantastic Four the Fantastic Five. The five of them can team up, exchange banter, fight Doctor Doom, because we know it's just going to be him again, or even the Chameleon like Spider-Man #1. And then by the end of the movie, part ways in knowledge that Peter would be fine on his own as Spider-Man. We only have one request. Please keep Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm. He was perfect for the role and has a sense of humor the character really needs. But man, the movie didn't really give him a chance to show his true humor. Captain America. You could make the argument that this crossover has already happened in Civil War, but we really want these two to team up again in a standalone crossover movie. They're both New Yorkers, and while they have a brief jokey bonding session in Civil War where Spidey holds a truck up over his head, it's something they could talk about a little bit more. Captain America is a character that often still feels like a man out of time, and the MCU's refusal to grow their characters has kept him this way for a pretty long time. This makes his potential interactions with Peter Parker quite interesting. While MCU Spidey will spend a lot of time fanboying over Captain America at first, the two could probably connect on a deeper level than other characters in the MCU. Both have grown up in poor New York households and both aspire to be something greater. Peter wants to be like the Captain, and the Captain wanted to be the best that he could ever be. This is a pairing that would do wonders for character growth and development, because regardless of which villain they face, their similar histories would give them something to talk about and to bond over. Of course, the action scenes will be cool too. Captain America throwing his shield to Spider-Man, only for Spidey to web it up and start swinging it around like he's an Olympic athlete. Hell yeah! Ultimate Spider-Man. This is probably the most obvious entry on the list that everyone overlooks. Miles Morales. Now, we're not saying that it necessarily has to be a crossover between universes, but it would be really cool to see Spider-Man play the mentor role to Miles. This story will only really work with a slightly older actor playing Spider-Man. It would have been ideal in the days of Andrew Garfield playing the character. All it takes is for another spider, maybe radioactive, to bite Miles Morales on a high school field trip, similar to what happened to Peter, and gaining his true powers. Like in the comics, Miles will be unhappy that his life has changed in such a way, but eventually decides to use his powers for good. The main difference is that this time around, Miles can seek out the original Spider-Man for guidance and help. One thing we've never seen Spider-Man do is be a mentor, and that's what makes this crossover pretty interesting. It will expand upon the characters we already know and also introduce us to the new ones. Miles Morales has always been firmly in Peter's shadow, and while he's had more success than most characters to take up the pre-existing title, a movie could really be what he needs to stand on his own. As for the name that Miles will go by in the movie, simple. Ultimate Spider-Man. The perfect name for a cocky young teenage superhero and call back to the comics that he originated in.
Ripley from Alien 3.
Deadpool. This could wind up being unbearable, as neither of these two can shut up. But fans want it, and it doesn't seem completely impossible. Deadpool is a fourth wall-breaking machine, and this of course can open the doors to a lot of crossovers, if only Fox and Sony are willing. The beauty of Deadpool is that he can literally walk into any given movie right at the start, announce that it's a crossover, and then the film is good to go. There's no real need to explain anything. The audience will know why he's there and won't question it too much. They'd probably just sit back and enjoy the show. Deadpool and Spider-Man have a lot of history together, seeing as Deadpool is partly responsible for Spider-Man's alien costume. This could make for a great setup if Hollywood ever wanted to get a second try at the symbiote storyline. All it takes is for Deadpool to crash land from outer space with the black goo in hand. It's pretty obvious that any movie shared between these two characters would end up being a comedy. It would make for a fun bit of fan service in a non-canon story. We know that Deadpool creators want it to happen, and with Fox and Marvel working together on the new FX series Legion, it's seeming more and more likely that Fox may collaborate with Marvel in a similar way that Sony is. Hey, fans can dream, can't they? Black Panther. The King of Wakanda is a pretty nice guy, regularly taking breaks from his home city, flying out to New York to do some street-level superheroes a favor. As well as taking up the mantle of Daredevil for a short while, Panther has worked with Spider-Man several times. A crossover movie between these two could easily become one of epic scale. Spider-Man himself working with the king of the most powerful nation on Earth. That's huge! It could become a story of political intrigue, with a villain like Man-Ape trying to lead a revolution. Add an assassin to the mix like Bullseye and you have the makings of a large-scale story that happens to involve Spider-Man as well. This gives Spider-Man a new setting to play in that hasn't been seen before, using the jungle to his advantage and tapping into his wild superpowers to a deeper level than before. Not only that, but it provides a great opportunity for the two characters to connect, with Black Panther acting as a wise mentor to Spider-Man, helping him hone his senses and tightening his fighting skills in preparation for the oncoming battle. These are two characters that complement each other very well, with Spider-Man adding some much-needed levity to Black Panther's stressed and serious persona. While it's not one that we can see happening anytime soon, it's certainly one that would develop Spider-Man as a character even more.
So does every guy have to go through all this just to find out your name?
Try asking for my number.
Daredevil. We're topping off this list with Spider-Man's closest ally, Daredevil. These two have operated in the same stomping grounds for 50 years and have not only teamed up multiple times in both their respective comics, but also share villains, with Spider-Man's wit and Daredevil's stoic nature, but it also makes for great storytelling. It's only logical that this crossover would feature the Kingpin, Daredevil's archenemy and prominent Spider-Man villain. With Matt Murdock also working as a lawyer to pay the bills, and the Kingpin's habit of gaining information that he shouldn't know, it would be great to have a story that is part legal battle, part superhero. Spider-Man's secret identity could fall into the Kingpin's hands, and the Kingpin could begin ruining his life, getting him fired, taking him away from his home, following the ideas put down in Frank Miller's Born Again. When he's finally done, he releases Spidey's identity to the public, and Peter Parker gets put on trial. From there, it only makes sense that Matt Murdock would come in as a defense attorney. We could get the great legal battles that the Daredevil comic is known for, mixed in with Daredevil and Spider-Man's superhero adventures, as they try to track down evidence to put the Kingpin away, and try to re-hide Peter's identity. It would make for a great crossover, and one true to the comics that it's based on. So that's all we have time for today. Why don't you tell us your preferred Spider-Man crossovers and what stories you'd want to see? Just leave them in the comments down below and remember to subscribe for more videos just like this one. As always, thanks for watching.